How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to show you exactly what it's like to drive the almighty SLS AMG from a first-person point of view. Built from 2010 to 2014, this was Mercedes' Halo supercar of the time, and in fact, it was the first ever car built entirely from the ground up by Mercedes AMG. While it's technically the true successor to the McLaren SLR, that awesome collaboration between Mercedes and McLaren, it's spiritually the successor to the 300 SL Gullwing of the 50s and 60s. That car, because of its aluminum space frame, they had to do something unique with the doors. The sill itself was so tall for structural rigidity, normal doors didn't really make sense. So the engineering marvel resulted in gullwing doors, which, let's be honest, look absolutely incredible. That was the fastest production car of the time, and it went on to become one of the most legendary supercars of all time. Now, moving on to the SLS AMG. We're gonna go ahead and pop the hood, because this thing has one of the most glorious Mercedes engines of all time. Under the enormous hood of the SLS AMG lies a 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8, despite the fact that it says 6.3 on the side of the car. 563 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque, and in fact, when it was originally unveiled at the Frankfurt Motor Show, it was the most powerful naturally aspirated production engine of all time. And it happens to sound absolutely brilliant. The car is 300 pounds lighter than the SLR due to its mostly aluminum construction, and it can sprint from 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 3.6 seconds. Now, not only do these doors look absolutely incredible, they make you feel like a superstar when you get in and out of this car. They're also really easy to open. The gas struts allow the doors to open really easily. They're not very heavy at all. And the crazy part is Mercedes originally actually thought about doing automatic closing doors. The reason they didn't is it was going to add 90 pounds, most of which would be at a higher center of gravity, which would be negative for the handling characteristics. Now, one of the craziest parts about the SLS AMG is, you can imagine, if the car rolls, how would you open the car doors? Because they're higher than the roof of the car. Well, they actually have exploding bolts in the hinges themselves that will blow the doors off the car with explosives in case of a rolling scenario, so you can get out of the SLS. How crazy is that? Coming around to the back of the car, I love the dual exhaust. It's got an active rear wing that can be actuated via a button in the car itself. But let's go ahead and see what it's actually like to drive the Mercedes SLS from a first-person point of view. Climbing into the SLS reveals a gorgeous interior that honestly, except for a couple parts maybe in the multimedia system, looks pretty modern, considering this specific car was built in 2011. I love the wide carbon fiber door sill with the AMG writing. The seats, the tan leather, looks absolutely stunning. They hold you in place well and they're comfortable at the same time. Upgraded Bang & Olufsen 1000-watt speaker system, Alcantara all over the headliner. The steering wheel feels pretty good in your hands. Now let's go ahead and pull the door shut, which actually takes a decent amount of reaching. If you're a shorter passenger, you might not actually be able to reach the door. But if we go ahead and close this and fire up that glorious V8 engine with the start-stop button, roll down the windows. That is a good sound. Holy moly. So one of the only shortcomings in the SLS AMG is its 7-speed double clutch transmission. Ironically, it's called the speed shift transmission, but it's not all that speedy. Sometimes it denies you downshifts and the upshifts aren't quite as fast as I would like. There are different drive modes to choose from. Comfort mode, which actually is called controlled efficiency, not comfort. I never knew that until recently. Then there's a sport mode, a little sportier driving experience, a sport plus mode, and then manual mode for shifting yourself, and that way it doesn't automatically upshift or downshift. And then RS, which is race start for a launch control. To put the car into drive, we pull on this lever right here. Put it into drive. I'm in manual. You can turn traction off. We're not going to do that. You can put the rear wing up And that will go ahead and activate that cool rear spoiler, and we are ready to go. One of the SLS's defining characteristics behind the wheel is the massive front hood. I mean, it looks like the hood goes on forever, which takes a little bit to get used to the first time you get behind the wheel. But if you trust the car, you trust its performance, you realize it's actually more nimble than the vehicle looks. Visibility is actually not bad in the SLS. Good rear visibility, good frontal visibility as well. You sit nice and low in the car. Honestly, it kind of feels like you're driving a Batmobile. Now, I will say, it's a little bit more of a GT cruiser than a super sports car. It is good in the canyons, but it's not exceptional. Later on, they made the Sls Amg Black Series, which was a more track-focused variant, lighter weight, more horsepower, cooler exterior appearance. But the true performance driving machines in terms of their track driving abilities didn't come until the second ever bespoke AMG vehicle, which was the Amg Gt, but more specifically the GT Black Series. Now, while the Amg Gt was technically the successor to this car, it didn't really feel quite like the Halo supercar the SLS was, mostly because of the doors. But now that they've set the Nürburgring record with the GT Black Series and the looks of that version are absolutely insane, that does feel like a true Halo supercar. So we'll go ahead and pick up the pace a little bit so you can hear that glorious V8. Rear-wheel drive, of course, so you got to be careful considering it is 563 horsepower. Rear-wheel drive, of course, so you got to be a little bit careful because this car is crazy tail happy. I mean, just a little bit too much stab of the throttle if you've got traction control off and the rear end goes absolutely flying. But it does feel like a pretty well-balanced car. The suspension rides nicely over bumps, like I said, especially in comfort or sport mode. It feels a bit more like a GT car, but in Sport Plus or manual, honestly, the suspension firms up. And it has virtually zero body roll. The steering, it's actually not that communicative, and you got to put more input into the steering than I think you'd expect for a traditional supercar. But this is such a perfect car to commute to work in, to go long distances, to top it out on the Autobahn. Now, funny enough, this car is actually owned by my dad, and it's effectively his daily driver. I think he's put about 40,000 miles on the car at this point since 2011. And it's been unbelievably reliable. He's done nothing but oil changes, brakes, and tires. So, despite being a supercar, being gorgeous, sounding amazing, and looking cool, it actually is relatively reliable, which honestly is impressive. And this is kind of the last of that great naturally aspirated era, where then with the Amg GT, we got the 4-liter twin-turbo V8, which honestly, Mercedes did a great job of making that sound good, but it doesn't sound as good as the SLS AMG. All right, let me shut up for a bit and let you listen to this thing a little bit more. Even in these tight, twisty roads, the relatively big SLS AMG, in terms of its feel behind the wheel, it's not actually a big car, does really, really well. The brakes are phenomenal. They're massive 15.3-inch rotors in the front, optional carbon ceramic brakes. This one does not have the optional carbon ceramics, but it still brakes really, really well. And you can feel that it's a significantly more performance-oriented car in terms of canyon carving and track driving than the SLR McLaren, which was much more of a just focused GT cruiser. that car, particularly with its transmission, was really clunky and kind of slow around the turns, but unbelievably fast in a straight line, and of course, unbelievably cool looks. Well, SLSs have climbed a bit in value since new. Originally, this car had an MSRP of $208,000. I believe my dad got it used for about 145 grand a year later, a year or two later. So they came down in value significantly. Now they've crept up a little bit, but they're still at a really reasonable level for how cool of a car you're getting. And I think that eventually in 20, 30, 40 years, this is gonna be a seriously expensive car. I mean, it is the spiritual successor to the 300 SL, which is legendary, and of course that car is millions of dollars. And this car is very similar in terms of its feel to that vehicle. Of course, it doesn't have the racing heritage that the 300 SL had, which of course makes a big difference in terms of values. But considering the AMG GT, including the Black Series, didn't have the cool doors, I think in the future this is going to be a pretty iconic vehicle, if nothing but for the doors alone, but then of course for that naturally aspirated V8, particularly as everything starts going hybrid and electric. This thing is going to be a monster from the past. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the SLS AMG Gullwing. I absolutely love this car and think it's a bit underappreciated in today's time. All right guys, look forward to seeing you next video.